Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful. And for the faithful, I'm David Staples, of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Hey, Bruce.
Hey David, how are you doing today?
Oh, excellent. My wife made a fantastic breakfast, so and we're going to go out cycling in a bit. So it should be a
Excellent.
good day at our
Beautiful
household.
day,
How are you?
blue sky,
Yeah,
blue sky.
yeah. We've got a route that we take through the West End, which is fantastic. So we're going to do that.
Nice.
All right. How are you?
Well, haven't really stepped out the door yet or had any breakfast, but just got the word on uh, this morning's news of the Oilers' big change in the coaching ranks, firing Jay Woodcroft and his defensive assistant Dave Manson after less than 2 years on the job. Actually, let's say 21 months on the job, and bringing in Kris Knoblauch and new slash old defense assistant Paul Coffey to replace the outgoing men. And it's a move that's got Jeff Jackson's fingerprints all over it.
Sure does. You know, one funny comment I hear, Bruce, is like, well, one thing I always think when I hear like, oh, they've had so many coaches in so many years, like it's like a new coach every year. And then I think, yeah, just like every other year of Connor McDavid's entire hockey career in his whole life, minor hockey, you get a new coach
Yeah,
every year. Junior hockey, you often get new coaches. Now, I don't know, maybe in Erie, he might just had Knoblauch the whole
he
time, I
did
guess.
three
That was
years.
the longest stretch with the same coach. Maybe McClellan lasted,
McClellan 3.5 years. Yeah,
which
three
is
three
which is
years
an
and 20 games. You know.
eternity in the NHL, 3.5 years coaching a team. That's a
Uh,
long time now. I don't know what the average stay is of an NHL coaches, but I don't think this is that unusual. Maybe it could be proven to me otherwise that the Oilers are more happy on the trigger finger than the other NHL teams. But that's one thought I had is like,
yeah.
it's not, I don't know if that's that, like the players are going to be confused. Come on, hockey isn't that complicated a game. I don't buy that at all. They should know these systems quickly, inside out, as part of being professional. They should be able to learn fast, adapt quickly. It's a terrible critique. Oh, well, we brought in a new system and the players, that was asking too much of the players. Are you kidding me? That's their whole job. And it has been since they were young players to learn hockey systems.
Yeah.
It's the stupidest kind of critique that you will see, and you see it all the time. So that's one of my pet peeves. Bruce, we're going to go through some comments on the story of the firing of Woodcroft and the hiring of Kris Knoblauch. Elliot Friedman, I think it was, who broke it this morning. And we'll just talk about your initial reaction, mine, just quickly. I thought after last night's game, when they finally played a great defensive game, which is what Woodcroft's been trying to achieve since he got here, and all the other coaches before that with the Oilers have tried to achieve. They did it again. You know, they did it last year fairly often. They played solid defensive games. Not enough, though. Anyway, I thought finally last night they got it together. Great defensive effort, just 4 grade A shots against. This is a team that averages 13 grade A shots against this year, and they just allowed 4. So
Yeah.
I thought, man, maybe he's turned it around, but not to be, not to be. When did you know? What did you think about it, Bruce? And when did you realize he was going to
Well,
get the gun?
well, the word has been circling for a while that this road trip would be the decisive thing, and uh, there was talk that if they lost after the San Jose game in Thursday, that it might happen then, or that they might just wait for the end of the road trip and then do it, which is how it turned out. Uh, some of my friends at the Heavy Hockey Network, Oilers
They
Live,
got it
and
right.
uh, 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 Michael there at Oilers Live had it on Friday morning that this was going to play out, and he suggested that all of Woodcroft Manson and Ken Holland might be axed. Then he later revised to say Holland might, remain with the organization, but in a little, less of a decision-making role than obviously he has been as the GM. And I think just the nature of the replacement hires here says this wasn't his decision. This was Holland's coach that got let go, and this was Jeff Jackson's coach who got hired. And I think that tells us plenty about the structure. As for when, last night in the post game, there was Woodcroft had a bit of a field day the last couple of days with some of the local media. Notable among them, Mark Spector of Sportsnet, which happens to be the rights holder, and he was he made a wise comment to him about not reading his stuff, which was, just sort of interaction stuff. And clearly there was something behind it, but he was very flippant in the post game last night, fielding a question from Spector, giving a one-syllable answer and immediately turning away and his attention somewhere else. And at that moment, I saw that and I thought, that's beyond what you normally see. And either he knows already that he's on his way out and he wants to get his digs in before he goes, or else he's suicidal. And I don't think it's the latter. So I think he's probably gone. And I'm sure enough 10 o'clock this morning, he's gone. So he surely knew it. And some saw him departing the ice in San Jose with Manson and conversing with each other and saying this might be it, was how the lip readers had it.
Yeah, I think that's
so
very
who the heck
iffy,
knows, but that loss in San Jose was a killer.
It was, and I thought
they had to come out of this road trip with a couple of wins, and they only got the one, impressive as it was.
Yeah, I thought he would be fired on Friday, actually, after that loss to San Jose. And it sounds like it was in the works. Good work by the heavy hockey guys. They looked like they got that scoop, and that's excellent work by them. And it's interesting how often that happens. There's someone who will hear something kind of on the fringe, or more of the fringe of the hockey world, and they'll get it out there first. There's been another number of other stories. I can't list them right now. I'd have to go do some research but there's been a number of times where it's been broken by people who aren't the most well-known insiders. So here's what
three by them. So
here's Frank Saravalli has this to say at the Daily Face-Off. Lots of people will say Kris Knoblauch lands in Edmonton because of Connor McDavid, but what is clear is Oilers CEO Jeff Jackson has a big belief in Knoblauch. As agent, many of Jackson's clients played for Knoblauch: McDavid, Connor Brown, Alex DeBrincat, Taylor and Darren Radish, Travis Dermott, and Ben Harper. So,
not a bad list.
Yeah. So a lot of people are calling for Holland to be fired. I think it's clear that Holland's an advisor now to Jeff Jackson, who makes the calls on trades, major trades, maybe everything. Jeff Jackson is the GM of this team. I think just based on the number of decisions that have been made and his fingerprints at least being all over them, Jeff Jackson's the GM. Ken Holland is senior advisor. So he is no longer the decision maker. Jackson is. Do you think that's my assessment, Bruce? I could be wrong. Yeah. What do you think of it? Do you think that's a credible assessment?
Well, in my post that I'm going to quote myself briefly, saying, "Make no mistake, today's moves were not orchestrated by Holland. Instead, they bear the fingerprints of Jeff Jackson, hired by Oilers this past summer." In my travels of the internet, I came across Greg Wyshynski of ESPN, and he in turn found an old article from 2017 from
that he wrote.
AP. It was actually written by Stephen Wino of the AP.
Okay. My mistake,
in 2017, and he's talked about the article was about the hiring of a rising coaching star on Dave Haxtell's staff in Philly, that being Kris Knoblauch. And it says agent Jeff Jackson has been glad to send McDavid and prospects, the guys you just mentioned, the Radishes, Dermott, DeBrincat, to Erie, where Knoblauch improved their NHL stock. And here's the money quote: "Connor David was going to play in the NHL no matter if Kris coached him or not. but he made Connor a better player, Jackson said. He teaches a culture of winning and speed and puck movement, but he empowers all the kids. And that sounds like a pretty good recipe for what the Oilers need, even as they already had, I think, a pretty good recipe of what they needed. But Jay Woodcroft was not Jeff Jackson's man, and it's clear that Kris Knoblauch was a long time ago. I mean, that's a 6-year-old quote I just gave you.
Yeah, that's interesting. I will say that I think what the Oilers need is actually something pretty different than that.
Mm-hmm.
The offensive stuff comes pretty naturally to them. The puck
Mm-hmm.
movement, the winning attitude. These guys they're all winners. Like, they have a winning attitude. What doesn't come naturally to them is playing fundamental defense. And we've had Todd McClellan, Ken Hitchcock, Dave Tippett, and Jay Woodcroft all come in. The first 3 guys were noted defensive specialists, hardcore defensive specialists.
Yep.
None of them could get this group of players, the majority of the players, to play consistent fundamental defense. This is a team that it's plagued by weak back checking. It's plagued by open looks in the defensive slot.
Mm-hmm.
It's endless. It's not every player on the team, and specifically, I don't think there's some conscientious defenders. Connor McDavid, Matthias Janmark, Derek Ryan, Cody Ceci, Brett Kulak. But to me, everyone else on the team is on a scale of iffy to terrible when it comes to their defensive fundamentals. And we've had a series of coaches come in and try to change that, and they have been unable to do so. And the only thing I can think, Bruce, is I think this is finally coming to a head. That it's pretty clear, with all the rush chances scored against the Oilers, that this is a team with massive defensive problems. And maybe the players themselves now, and this is the only way it's going to change, because McDavid changed himself from a iffy defensive player into a conscientious and good defensive player. I think that it may be a moment where many more of them make that realization and turn the corner in terms of playing defense in the NHL, which will allow them to make the playoffs. They won't even make the playoffs if they don't do that this year, and let alone win the Stanley Cup. So to me, I don't know if all coaches preach defense, including Knoblauch. So that'll happen as well. But to me, that's the big issue.
Yeah, well, I guess where I sit on it is that if he coaches a speed and puck movement game, then he'll be coaching to the strengths of the team. Bringing in some guy that some Italian soccer coach that just wants to park the bus in the defensive zone would be just very coaching away from the team's strengths. So there's a fine line in there, and obviously you want some combination of all those things. But if he's emphasizing speed and puck movement, well, the Oilers are pretty good at that. If that's, the style of play that he wants to teach. But speed is a two-way thing, as the great Bill James pointed out in baseball, but it's equally true in hockey. That the speed is the one element that applies in both offense and defense. And that's something that some of the Oilers have learned better than others, as you point out. Empowering the kids is something that a lot of folks have been kind of complaining about, even with Woodcroft, which originally was seen as a strength of his. But this year, the kids have been getting pretty limited ice time and opportunity. And if he has, the new guy has some way of blending that in, I mean, the key is, can the kids play hockey well enough to earn the ice time and not get blitzed during it? And we'll see. I mean, he comes in with Dylan Holloway just having played his best game in the NHL. He's got young Raphael Lavoie, who played under 4 minutes last night, and Philip Broberg in the minors. I mean, those are the only 3 Ken Holland era draft picks that are even on the team. And so far this year, among them, they played 25 games and they have 1 point.
It's funny.
Goal last night.
The trend with all the coaches getting fired, we see the same things happening. We see an over-reliance on McDavid and Draisaitl on the same line. We see no third line to speak of. Last night Woodcroft made a point of having a third line.
Mhm.
No fun, like less and less ice time for the bottom two lines, and more and more reliance on veteran players as opposed to younger players. And this is the trend with each of the coaches who got fired, I believe. In their last months, we saw that increasingly, and we just saw it again. Bruce, let's go to some of the comments. Here's from Kurt Levins of the Cult of Hockey. Kurt, here's what Kurt said. My initial reaction is that this is a mistake. Perhaps I will be proven wrong. I feel for Jay Woodcroft. Mistakes have been made by him, yes, but this whole mess has hardly been on only him.
Bing, 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 winner.
I feel for Jay Woodcroft, but you know what? I don't think people should grieve too much for Jay Woodcroft. He got a chance to coach Connor McDavid. He realized his lifetime dream of coaching in the NHL. He signed a multi-million-dollar contract, and he's still getting paid. He had 2 shots in the playoffs with a fantastic team to win. He had some real success, and then he had some failures. He's I think clearly going to get another NHL job. More than that, though, to me, he's shown signs of like really strong character and a sunny disposition. I don't think that Jay Woodcroft himself is. I could be wrong. I do not know. I'm not reading his mind right now. I have a sense though that Jay Woodcroft is just fine, and he'll have some bitter feelings about this, that, and the other thing, which goes with getting fired. But I think he's going to be just fine, and he is just fine, and he's going to get another NHL job.
Mm-hmm. Well, talk about playoffs. He's first Oilers coach in 25 years to win playoff series in consecutive seasons. The last guy to do that was Ron Lowe, who won 1 series each in 1997 and 1998. And those 2 years were the last 2 years, and he got 13 games this year. So it's to say it's a mistake. I mean, you obviously need the long-term view, and we're at the turning of the page, and we haven't read any of the new pages. So it's premature to say that. But he sure got a short rope. And unfortunately, this slow start coincides with the only time that he's been working for Jeff Jackson's Oilers, and it was Jackson who's, his sample size of Woodcroft is very short, even as he allegedly watched every single Oilers game during Connor McDavid's entire career. He's only been sort of internal to the team since, a few months ago. So premature or not, let's say premature without saying mistake. And I would like to see Woodcroft with the track record that he's already established, which is the best points percentage in the history of the Oilers. And coming off a 109-point season, maybe warranted a little bit more, but there's a changing of the guard above him, and now he's been swept out with it. Every new GM, whether he's named that or got some other whizzy title like CEO of hockey operations, every new GM wants his own coach there. And it's pretty clear that Kris Knoblauch is Jeff Jackson's guy, and Jay Woodcroft, for all of his strengths and endearing qualities, was not.
Yeah, it's entirely predictable. Whether it was a mistake or not, it's entirely predictable when a team is in the dumps. It's the goalie and the coach. That's first they got rid of the goalie, Jack Campbell. And that was definitely not a mistake. Campbell needed to go to the minors where he's continued to struggle. His game isn't NHL quality. It's not close to NHL quality. It hasn't been since he got here, truth be told. So that had to happen. Woodcroft, if they had stayed with him, I would have been okay. I'm okay with them firing him. I'm just we'll see what happens. I don't have a strong I have a strong feeling about the need for the players on the team to finally wake up and realize they've got a problem. And I hope they've hit rock bottom in terms of their defensive play. They showed last night they're all capable of it. They know how to do it. They just don't. They choose not to. They don't prepare mentally before the game to do it. It's not their focus. It's got to change, and if it doesn't change, they're going to keep suffering, and that will be, I think, a conscious choice, because as you say, Bruce, this is a fast team. This is a team that has the speed and the physical assets to play defense. It's just the attitude that isn't there. Let's move on to a couple comments I'll read two comments in a row because they kind of go hand in hand. This is from Oilers fan Dennis King. How did that out-of-date dullard Ken Holland survive this? And does McDavid own the team now? That's how it looks. And then from Oiler fan Regan Podolek. Some of you Oiler fans may not like Woodcroft was fired. Calling out McDavid for calling the shots on the next coach? Tread lightly. Turning on your number one player, though,
yeah,
it's a business, and winning is important. No different than, say, they're running the show in the 80s, and insulating handpicked people around Gretzky. So, what's your thoughts on this? Like this idea that there's this friends of Connor who are now here, there, and everywhere.
As in his former agent, now his former coach.
Yes.
Now in positions of extreme power on the team.
Yeah.
Well, maybe so. Do you want to criticize and dump all over him? I don't know. I don't know if he's making the decisions or who is, if Daryl Cates is, if he's reading the tea leaves or involving McDavid in the decision-making process. To some degree, it doesn't matter. I mean, what's done is done, right? And it's the record of the general manager who's in place. And I disagree with Dennis on the point of him, still surviving. Well, yes, he's still around. And I think the heavy hockey guys got it right with their sort of revised take that that he might not be outright let go, but he will have a reduced role in the decision-making of the organization. And I'm frankly quite interested to see who will represent the Oilers at this afternoon's press conference coming up at 2:00 Mountain. If you subscribe to Oilers Plus, apparently, to watch it, which I do, so I will watch it. But whether that'll be Jeff Jackson, along with the new hires, Kris Knoblauch and good old Paul Coffey, and whether Holland will even be part of it, he may well be, but it'll be interesting to see the interplay among those principals in the news conference itself, and there may be a tell or two there. But it seems to me that these decisions, probably the Campbell demotion and almost certainly the coaching change, were not of his doing.
I suspect Holland will lead the press conference and Jackson won't be there. That's my prediction.
Won't be there?
Won't be there.
Okay.
Which is I'm less sure on, but I think Holland will lead the press conference.
Okay.
My take on the whole thing of McDavid calling the shots is, well, like on some level, I hope so. Like, not that he's calling the shots, but that he's been consulted in a reasonable way, that he knows what's going on and he's good with it. I think that's essential. Players, this isn't 1970 or 1960 or 1950 when they let Gordie, was it sorry they let Gordie Howe fill in his own contract knowing he'd only give himself $1,000 raise or something because he was so humble.
The story was that Jack Adams would present him with a blank, with a contract with a blank thing and say, Gordie, you fill in your own figure, and Gordie would always shy away and say, you know best, Mr. Adams, you pay me what you think I'm worth.
So the players
and Jack Adams screwed him.
They were
years.
And many of the players were similarly naive about business in those days. Yep. The players these days are not naive about business. They are sharp. They're smart. They're on top of things. They're running.
They all have agents.
They have, and listen, Connor McDavid can be a free agent in 2.5 years from now. So 2 3/4. So it's not like the NBA where the players conspire and get together and make trades and then force everyone else to go along with what they've come up with. I think that's literally how the NBA works now. And
for sure.
Yeah. the players do that. I think they do that. Connor Brown arriving on the team and probably all working together on that with Ken Holland. There's a lot more buy-in needed from the players. There's a lot more input. The star players have a tremendous amount of power within their teams, and I suspect Connor McDavid is fairly. He's not aggressive in this regard.
Mm-hmm.
I think he strikes me as a very obviously he's super confident, but there's I think also a certain amount of humility about him where he wouldn't be super aggressive and saying I want this, I want that. He doesn't strike me as kind of the petulant type of person at all. He's much more of a team player. So yeah, I think he's consulted. Yes, I think they respect his opinion and they listen to it, and I think they should. It's right that they do so. I'm glad they're doing so. I'm glad. I thought it was a master stroke hiring Jeff Jackson, his former agent. He's completely qualified to be a GM of a hockey operation. They made the best pick they could possibly make. Now, whether this all turns out and they actually win a Stanley Cup, this group of people, that's a whole other question. And I think it comes down to the issue that I raised, honestly. Like, will all of the players buy in on defensive hockey completely? And that has to do with the coach. So I hope, they have a coach who sells that idea, but it's, they all have to do it. And McDavid is leading the way in that regard. I think Connor McDavid is a leader in terms of trying to get these guys to play defensive hockey. So I'm good with Connor McDavid. I don't have a problem with anything that he's done as an Oiler.
And now we have a Hall of Fame defenseman showing defensemen the way to playing great defensive hockey. I mean, all of us who remember the 80s will remember Paul Coffey first and foremost for his stalwart defensive play.
McCurdy sticks the knife right between the eyes.
I love Paul Coffey, don't get me wrong. I'm very interested to see how he does, but it's a curious move given his sort of lack of coaching experience.
Yeah, he's been around the NHL.
He's been around the Oilers for a few years now, and clearly his role is elevated since Jeff Jackson's come on the picture.
I'm okay with them hiring Paul Coffey as an assistant coach as well. Like, I know people are going to hate that. Like, some people just hate that, but
maybe they'll start blaming him for every goal against now instead of sticking Dustin Schwartz with the responsibility. No news on him, by the way, and that'll have. I'm sure his name came up in some of the internet comments that you were going through.
Yeah, that is. So Paul Coffey as a coach, he doesn't have, like you say, Bruce, he doesn't have the normal credentials. A lot of people being NHL superstar is the only credential that you need to get a coaching job in the NHL. I mean, what credentials is, a lot of people have risen quickly if you were an NHL superstar to a high level of management. And the bigger the superstar you were, the higher level you get promoted to right off the top. So this is not unusual, and it's just an assistant coach. He's just the assistant coach. It's not like the other guys. Maybe if someone like Paul Coffey, who's he will know how to build on the strengths of the players. Put it that way, like Evan Bouchard.
Yeah,
he will know how to get the most out of a
interesting.
player like Bouchard. But I think Coffey, maybe Coffey preaching defense, which I'm sure he will. Hearing that from one of the greatest offensive players in the history of the NHL might carry a little bit more weight. Coffey played defense well enough to be on a number of Stanley Cup winning teams.
Oh, sure. Oh, no.
And a number of Canada Cup winning teams. He was in some ways had to go through the transformation to more of a better defensive player. He was never like, Rod Langway. In terms of defense, but he became at least an adequate NHL defender. So, and I think that's certainly within the realm of possibility for Evan Bouchard. So, man, he's got so much hockey experience. He's been around hockey all his life. He's a hockey lifer. He just knows hockey inside out, and he knows the psychology of great players because he was one. And maybe if he's good at that, and he does strike me as a perceptive person. I've talked to him. Interviewed him a couple times at length. I've listened to his comments closely on different issues, and he strikes me as being very perceptive, very sharp guy. So I'm okay with. He's just the assistant coach. He's not the head coach.
Right.
So I think it could work out. That could.
Yeah,
No.
it is a bit of a different role, though. I mean, you talk about some of the great superstars that have gone to prominent roles. Often they've kind of been in overarching umbrella roles, like Brendan Shanahan in Toronto or Cam Neely in Boston, where they were above the GM, but the GM had the hockey decisions. Whereas getting right into the coaching staff is different. I mean, famously, Arizona Coyotes tried making Wayne Gretzky their head coach, and that didn't end well at all. But anyway, we'll see. I'm hoping that he can at least teach some mindset. And one of the criticisms of the Oilers was that of the makeup of the team as now is that they don't have any prior Stanley Cup winners in the room. Well, they sure do right now, because Paul Coffey won 1, 2, 3, 4 Stanley Cups in 2 different cities. And
Was it just
I'm
4?
Yeah, 3 in Edmonton before he was traded
Detroit?
out of here in '87, and 1 with Pittsburgh in '91.
Didn't he win a cup with Detroit?
Detroit, no, they lost to New Jersey in the '95 Stanley Cup Finals. The year he won. Is that the year he won his last Norris Trophy? It's around that time, anyway. But he succeeded in a lot of different places. I'm very interested to see too, and who knows when this guy makes it back up here, but what he might be able to help Philip Broberg with, who was a very fine skater. Coffey is obviously an exceptional skater as a D-man, and whether he might be able to help Broberg turn the corner and use his mobility to greater advantage.
So he's been the head coach for 2 years of high-level AAA teams in Toronto, U15 and U16. Head coach of the Pickering Panthers of the Ontario Junior Hockey League 1 year, skills coach of the Oilers 2 years. So, and then all of his playing experience. So, yeah, okay, Bruce, let's just final thoughts. Let me just see if there's any other quotes. You have any final thoughts on this then? Shebang.
Well, nothing final. It's all sort of transitional at this particular moment in time. But as mentioned, I'm keen to hear what they actually say, if anything, really, at the press conference today. I do want to say I wish Jay Woodcroft well in his future endeavors, and I'm sure he'll land on his feet somewhere, maybe in Ottawa under Steve Stais, as some wag pointed out on the internet. And also wish Dave Manson well. I had not realized until just this week when his son Josh went on a mom's road trip that Josh's mom, Dave's wife, had passed away this summer. So he's been dealing with bereavement in very recent times, and now he's got this piled on top of a crap Sunday, So it's sometimes these things are tough at the personal level, and those guys gave their best that they had to Edmonton Oilers, and now they'll presumably do the same, and they may well go as a duo, land somewhere else as a coaching. I think Woodcroft has established his credentials, and he will get another chance somewhere in the NHL.
Yeah, I wish them both well as well. I thought Jay Woodcroft was a really strong coach for the Oilers, and I wish it's such a shock that it turned out this way.
So fast, yeah.
Yeah, so fast. We're still all reeling, but it's. I just want to do. There is one more comment that I found on the goaltending. Oh, this is from Darcy Woodguy McLeod. Goalie expert Kevin Woodley said last June, quote, "All the Oilers had to do was look at Jack Campbell's adjusted save percentage in Toronto, and they wouldn't have offered him that contract." Mm-hmm. Today, Woodcroft loses his job because the NHL guide and record book doesn't have adjusted save percentage. That is a very funny comment. So now, what Campbell was the best. Like they needed another goalie. They needed a goalie, right? They needed a goalie. They couldn't get Darcy Kemper, who they really wanted. He was going to Washington. I don't know how. I don't think he's done that well there. So Campbell was the next best bet, and that was the price. At the same time, Darcy makes a good point. But necessity drives necessity and opportunity drive a lot of decisions. Who's available at what cost? Who's the alternative at what cost?
And for how many years would be my addition to what the cost is? You know, when you've got an up and coming goalie in Stu Skinner who's going to play in the NHL right away, to bring in a guy with a 5-year roadblock contract to be your starter was a bit excessive. Like there was other options available of, trade for a guy with 1 or 2 years left, or, but they made the big splash. And I saw something interesting on Campbell yesterday. I won't say there's anything to it other than I found it interesting. And that is between his first half and his second half in Toronto, in his last year in Toronto, where he absolutely crashed from like a 935 to 886 in the second half. He'd spent some time out of the lineup on COVID leave, and we've heard of some players, Jonathan Taves, famously among them, but also the young fellow from Minnesota, Rossi,
Sutter,
and Sutter. Yeah, good point. And I would add the name of Jesse Puljujärvi as a guy who left the team with a COVID illness in December of 2020 and was never as good after he came back. And I mean, we don't know what's going on with any of these guys. I'm just throwing it out there that this observation was made, and it's just enough to make you stop and go, So, but of course the Oilers, I'm not sure how they would even scout for that before signing the guy, but
I hear so much from the anti-vaxxers, Bruce. All the anti-vaxxers are muttering, "It's the vaccine, Bruce. It's the vaccine." Anyway, let's not get into relitigating COVID debates. A lot of people are saying though that the Oilers had good analytics, and they certainly were getting more shots at net, way more shots at net, and way more shots on net as well. But I think this hand's being a little overplayed. This idea. When we dig down into the shots, Bruce, we have found that for the very best shots in the slot, wide open shots in the slot area, the opposition actually has an edge, a slight edge on the Oilers this year. It's 87 to 84 for the opposition. So on the 5-alarm shots, they're going 33% of the time on average, the opposition has an edge. Overall, yes, the Oilers, I think, had, when you factor in all the other shots as well, the Oilers had a slight edge or a bit of an edge in play. I'm going to suggest it's closer to about 50-50. And in terms of expected goals, what you'd expect from the shot quality, you'd expect the Oilers to have given up about as many goals this year as they've scored. That's not the case. So the difference there, the reason there's a difference is puck luck, shooting luck from the Oilers, bad shooting luck, and superior goaltending from the other team. And I do think superior goaltending from the other team is other than McDavid's injury, that's the biggest part of this story this year. Everything else is kind of the same, but McDavid's injury and the weak goaltending play compared to the opposition is why the Oilers have been had this terrible slide, and it fundamentally is the reason Woodcroft's out.
Well, this morning, Jay Fresh Hockey, who's a well-known analytics data provider, has posted goal differential above expected, all situations, and has Canucks at number 1 in the league. It's 34, plus 34 better than might be expected from their underlying numbers. And the Oilers dead last at minus 24. And I pointed out just in the 3 games between the Oilers and the Canucks, that difference was 14 goals. The Oilers were expected to outscore Vancouver by 2 and got outscored by 12, 18-6. And I watched those 3 games, and there's no way I would make the case the Oilers were the better team over the 3 games. I don't care what the analytics say. I also would say Vancouver wasn't 18-6 better than the Oilers. They were getting some shooting luck and some save luck. They had the better goaltending, and they had and they're a hot shooting club. And just last night, we finally saw a little bit of adjustment where Vancouver lost by 3 and Edmonton won by 3. So that huge margin is probably a little less this morning than it was yesterday morning, but it's just a gigantic difference. But dead last in the NHL.
I don't believe that.
6 worse than the Sharks in terms of versus expect. I mean, the Sharks numbers suggest they're real bad, and so do their goals numbers. So the disagreement isn't quite so much. The Oilers say they should be well above 500 for goals, 50% of the goals, and they're not. They're closer to 40%. And that's a losing formula in this league. And I don't just accept the raw values of the analytics, but I would suggest that the truth lies somewhere in the middle.
It's certainly pointing in the right direction in this case. It's directionally correct. It's a little overstated, but and our numbers found the same thing. We are finding the Oilers should have about the same number of goals as they've given up, and they don't. They're not close to that. So we're coming to the same conclusion. It's just not as extreme as
right. No, our numbers are more moderate than these, and I would suggest they might be a little closer to the truth.
Bruce, let's leave it there. You're going to cover the press conference today because you have Oilers Plus and I do not. So, all right.
Time for now, and back at her in an hour.
Okay. All right. Thanks for talking, Bruce.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.